4th and goal at the 5.
Man-to-man with 2 safeties helping deep, 1 on each side.
Quarterback. His drive is hit for the touchdown. One official called it. Another official has waved him off. So now you've got a conflicting view on the field. The far sideline official raised his hands and signaled touchdown. And that's the big one.
They did not have the gaps filled in the middle. Vinny Testaverde had a hole straight up the chute.
He almost fumbled.
Whoa!
He didn't get across.
The ball did not cross the plane. From that angle, it looked like it did not cross the plane. Almost fumbled the snap. Remember, the ball has to cross the plane, not his head, not his shoulders.
He didn't get it.
One of the most, I think, incredible plays in Jet history, because I think most Jet fans, if you ask them about that play, the play that was ruled a touchdown, that shouldn't have been a touchdown, so many Jet fans would be like, you know what? We've had so many calls go against us, we deserved one. So even if it was a wrong call, we don't care. And for the Jets in that 98 season, that propelled them to go the rest of the way and actually do something they had never done before. And we'll get to that in a minute. But so you have Parcells come in after the 96 season, after the mess that was Rich Kotite, and an understanding at how Parcells came to the Jets. He was still under contract with the Patriots when he decided he wanted to leave the Patriots. So the Jets had to work out compensation with New England for Parcells to be able to coach the 97 season. Now, originally, if you can believe this, the Jets were going to hire Bill Belichick to be their head coach, and Parcells was kind of going to oversee things because he wasn't allowed to be involved in the day-to-day operations as long as he was still under contract with the Patriots. But what happened was the commissioner realized that was stupid. Jets and Patriots worked out compensation. I think the Jets gave them a 3rd and 4th round pick in 97, a 2nd round pick in 98, and a 1st round pick in 99 as compensation to allow Parcells to coach the 1997 season. Now, I have more on that, on Parcells' hiring, on the whole situation with him and the Patriots in a Brady Belichick historical breakdown podcast that I did earlier in the year. So if you really want to get into it, you can listen to that. But that's really all I'm going to say as far as the details behind the Jets hiring Parcells. So, but definitely with Parcells at the helm, the Jets had something they had never had before. Now that's a coach that came with a winning background. Okay? Now with the firing of Kotite, a few disturbing trends came about. All right? In the history of the Jets, from their start in 1960 as the Titans, through Kotite's firing, no head coach had ever finished with a winning record. So that what that means, obviously, is a coach in his tenure as Jets head coach, no head coach had ever finished with a winning record. Every coach the Jets had hired, by the time that they were not head coach anymore, either they're firing or the coach quitting, they had had a losing record. So that in itself was disturbing, okay? Another disturbing trend was that since the NFL-AFL merger in 1970, as far as all the teams that were around at the merger in 1970, the only team involved in that merger that had yet to win a division title were the Jets. So this is what Parcells was coming into when he took over as head coach in 1997. In his first year in 1997, he inherits a 1-15 team. They barely missed the playoffs in 97. That's what a great job he did turning this team around. And he kind of put his fingerprints all over the Jets. They look like a real organization for the first time in a long time under Parcells in 97. However, they had a chance to make the playoffs, the final game of the year. They went to Detroit, and a couple of plays led to them losing. There was a Leon Johnson halfback pass. There was was intercepted. There was a Ray Lucas pass that was intercepted. What had happened was Parcells didn't like Neil O'Donnell, and O'Donnell was the quarterback when Parcells came in. He played with him for most of the 97 season, I think, with the understanding that he was going to look for another quarterback when he could. He actually replaced O'Donnell in a couple games where Glenn Foley came in and took over and led the Jets to a few victories, come from behind victories. And I think the writing on the wall was there for O'Donnell, where the final game of the year, instead of staying with O'Donnell at very key spots, Parcells went away from him. And that was kind of the reason why the Jets didn't win that game, is because two plays that O'Donnell was not in were intercepted, and that led to the Lions beating the Jets to eliminate the Jets from any chance of making the postseason in 1997. So you have a 1-15 that Parcells takes over. That team turns into a 9-7 team in 97. Then in 98, the Jets finished 12-4 and won the division title, the AFC East, for the first time in team history. A big part of that success was Vinny Testaverde, who took over for Glenn Foley in the third game of the year after the Jets had lost the first 2 games of the season. If you can imagine, the year that the Jets win their only division title in team history up to that point since the merger, they had started 0-2. But Foley got hurt in the second game. Testaverde came in. He started in the team's third game of the season against the Colts at home. The Jets routed them that game and beat them like 44-6 or something. And Testaverde just took off. And for the first time in his career, Testaverde was a very, very good quarterback. He had a season in Baltimore where he had 33 touchdowns and 16 picks. But this was beyond anything that Testaverde had accomplished in his career. 29 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, and without a doubt, he was the leader for the Jets on offense, a very potent offense that the Jets had. So, led by Testaverde, they also had Curtis Martin, who they had signed from the Patriots after the 1997 season. That cost them a couple of draft picks as well because he was a restricted free agent. But Parcells knew that he needed to have an every down back like Martin. He signed him, and Martin was a big part of the Jets winning the division in 98. And also, at wide receiver, they had 1996 first overall pick Keyshawn Johnson, who had put together a great season in 98, had over 1,000 yards receiving, and was without a doubt the Jets' leader at the wide receiver position, one of the best to ever play for the Jets. And Keyshawn was just a winner. When he came in, there was just a little change in attitude, and Keyshawn really hated to lose. And all those things kind of added to the Jets. The addition of Martin, the addition of Testaverde, obviously Parcells coming in, all those things working together created the Jets' first division title in team's history. Now, actually, in that 98 year, the Jets advanced to the AFC Championship Game in the divisional round of the playoffs. For the first time in history, not only did they win a division, but they also had a first-round bye, which is the only time that's ever happened in team history. They defeat the Jaguars 34-24 in the divisional round. Now they're going to the AFC Championship Game to play the defending champion Denver Broncos. After opening a 10-0 lead midway through the third quarter, so I think all Jet fans at that point, up 10-0 halfway through the third quarter, were so excited they literally probably did not know what to do with themselves. But after that point, the Jets just kind of fell apart. 23 unanswered points later, they had failed to get back to the Super Bowl for the first time since the merger, and they wound up losing 23-10 to the eventual champion, again, repeat champion, Denver Broncos. So the success of the 98 season had Jet fans extremely excited for the 99 season. All right, finally the team had a competent quarterback, as Testaverde really had established himself as the team leader. Again, 29 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, a career year for him. And Parcells that finally brought out what everyone had expected Testaverde to be, that game-changing quarterback. So the season starts at home against the Patriots, and the Jets are the clear preseason favorite to reach the Super Bowl out of the AFC and most likely win the Super Bowl. I think most people were picking them to do that year. So after falling behind 10-7, the Jets were driving to take the lead midway through the second quarter. Now, however, after mishandling a handoff from Testaverde, Curtis Martin fumbled the football. And Curtis Martin hardly ever fumbled, okay? We're talking about a running back that just didn't fumble. So on a misunderstanding on the snap and the handoff between him and Testaverde, Martin loses the handle. In the process of, after he hands off, Testaverde relaxed for a second. Then he sees that Martin has fumbled the ball. In the blink of an eye, decides to try and dive on it, and he ruptures his Achilles heel. Okay? Almost immediately, you see him fall to the ground, boom, like he was shot. So he's there sitting on the ground, pounding his fist into the ground, and Jet fans are watching TV and saying, oh no, here we go. Because as great as a coach as Parcells was, the one glaring mistake he made in his tenure as a Jets head coach was he did not secure a legitimate backup for Testaverde in the 99 season. Okay? And, I mean, I guess to his defense, Testaverde never really had been hurt before. I mean, we're talking about a guy who really didn't miss any time in his career before that. So, maybe Parcells was thinking, why do I really need a backup quarterback? This guy's just extremely durable. And as it turned out, he didn't even get hurt on a sack or a contact play. It was a freak play that eventually did him in. Jet fans are watching Testaverde pound his hand on the field, and the feeling of all this promise and all this hope kind of just went right up in smoke. In the post-game news conference, it was discovered that Testaverde had torn his Achilles and he was done for the season. So what followed was inexperienced quarterbacks that had no idea how to run the Jets offense. Rick Mirer was brought in from the Seahawks, and Mirer had his own issues in leading the Seahawks. And by that time in his career, Mirer was not a very good quarterback. He didn't really understand. The Jets had just signed him. He had no idea of how to run their offense. The Jets started 1-6 with him, and that was just really hard for them to recover as far as making the playoffs. Now, as a team, the second half of the year, after going 2-6 in the first half, second half of the year they went 6-2. They put in Ray Lucas at quarterback, who, at the time, I don't think it would have been fair to really say, hey, Parcells, why didn't you go to Ray Lucas right away? I don't think they really knew what they had with Lucas, and it was just kind of like the iron being hot at that time. And we found out in the seasons after that, Lucas wasn't a very good quarterback either. But for that season, those 8 games, 9 games, 10 games that they had with Lucas, he played the best football in his career. And by the end of that year, actually, the end of the 99 year, the Jets were the best team in the AFC. They just ran out of time. So they finished 8-8. And again, you're figuring, okay, well, get Testaverde back this year. We still have Parcells. We still have a lot of our core guys, a young Curtis Martin, a young Keyshawn Johnson. This is just a setback. We'll be back in 2000. However, after the season, the biggest shock that happened was that Parcells, all that he led the Jets back from and all that the Jets suffered through in the 99 season, you figured he would want one more year of making a run at it with a healthy team. However, Parcells, after their final game against the Seahawks, in 1999, decides that he had had enough and he just can't be head coach anymore. That he's, it's run its course. He doesn't want to be a head coach anymore. He doesn't want the daily grind of doing that. It's time for him to go. He addresses the team using the poem Man in the Mirror. He expresses his reasons for leaving the team. Jet players are kind of shocked as well. Some of them begged him to stay. I know Keyshawn Johnson was one of them. Curtis Martin was one of them. But it doesn't matter. Parcells is no longer the head coach. And automatically, because of the way that their agreement had, Bill Belichick then ascended to be head coach of the Jets. Now, in one of the most bizarre happenings ever, the next day at a press conference, Belichick decides to resign as head coach of the Jets. And with a little napkin puts down, I resign as HC of the NYJ, something that had, just shocked everyone. But in Belichick's defense, there was a little instability in the Jets' ownership because Leon Hess had died and the Jets still hadn't found an owner yet. And Belichick claimed that was the reason why he decided to resign. But really what happened is Bob Kraft came in, and after the Jets had kind of taken Parcells from him, he then took Belichick, and the guy who you thought was going to be the head coach of the Jets in 2000, Belichick decided he didn't want to do it. He winds up going to New England. The Jets do get compensation for tampering. They're awarded a couple draft picks, but they don't get Belichick. And now they're kind of left without a head coach because Parcells isn't going to coach. And even though he's still under contract, Parcells still had 1 more year left on his contract. Many people didn't know what the Jets were going to do. And Parcells himself, he insists he doesn't want to be head coach, but he also says that he's not going to abandon the team. All right, so no one really knew what that meant, but that's what happened after the shock with Belichick. Again, and more on that Belichick, on that whole background of everything that happened, you can tune into the Belichick and Brady Legacy podcast that I did a while ago. That really explains everything. All right, so meanwhile, while this fiasco is going on with Parcells and Belichick resigning and leaving to join the Patriots, the deal for the Jets' new ownership gets finalized, and Woody Johnson is brought in as the Jets' new owner. One of the first things that Woody Johnson decides to do is talk Bill Parcells into coming back as head coach. But Parcells really just didn't want to coach. However, he was able to convince Parcells to stay around, and he was then got the title of Director of Football Operations. He wound up staying through the end of the 2000 season, and one of the decisions that Parcells helped with was the hiring of the new head coach, which turned out to be Al Groh. Now, Groh was the linebacker coach in 98 and 99 under Parcells, and he was kind of the next guy up, okay? He had been in the system for a while. He knew the Jets were comfortable with giving him the head coaching reins because they felt like it's not that drastic of a change from Belichick to Groh. Even though Parcells' departure was really abrupt, his tenure overall as head coach had a real positive effect on the organization. And to me, it was a real turning point for them. Joining us once again is Chris Felica of ESPN College Game Day. Chris, you look at this era of Jets history, starting with Carroll, moving on to Rich Kotite, and after Carroll kind of fell apart and the Jets fell apart after the 94 season, he was the scapegoat. Then you had the famous press conference with Leon Hessen. I'm an old man. I don't want to lose anymore.
I want to win now.
Right. So he hires Rich Kotite. Now we know the disaster, 4-28. Thank God that he was gone. And then they bring in Parcells. What do you think that meant to the Jets?
It gave them legitimacy. Going back to the Kotite, though, I remember I was so disappointed that they beat the Cardinals that year. I wanted that. If there was ever a team that deserves to go 0-16 in the NFL, it was the Rich Kotite New York Jets. I mean, that they would have been the poster child for 0-16, and of course the Lions wound up doing it a few years later. But I guess the silver lining is they 1-15 did allow them to get Keyshawn Johnson, which obviously had a big. He was a big factor into the success that Bill Parcells had. But I think Parcells being as loved and adored in New York as he was because of winning Super Bowls with the Giants, I think that gave the Jets a lot of legitimacy. And I mean, he really took the terrible team that they had under Kotite, and if it wasn't for a couple of ridiculous plays against the Lions in the regular season finale, they would have wound themselves up in the playoffs under him his first year.
Right, and then you have Denver. They go 12-4. They're definitely a team to beat in the AFC. Then you have the next year, which I think just kind of typifies the Jets, where everyone is looking for 1999 to be the team that they're going to get to the Super Bowl, and then in a play where it's not, a guy that never, ever fumbles, and Curtis Martin fumbles, and then you have Testaverde, who never got hurt, reacting to the fumble, tears his Achilles, he's out, and then we were left with Rick Mirer and Ray Lucas and a team that still finished 8-8, and at the end of the year was probably the best team in the AFC, but doesn't make it to the playoffs.
Yeah, that Denver game really, I mean, it still stings with me, and for a variety of reasons. I mean, you knew you had the Atlanta Falcons waiting for you in the Super Bowl.
Right.
The team that they had destroyed early in the year.
28-3, I remember.
And you're leading in the third quarter.
10-0.
And then basically a breakdown where the Broncos kind of lined up wrong and resulted in the bomb downfield that eventually put them on the board. And I was actually in Colorado for that game. I was working the X Games that year, and I was in Crested View, Colorado, watching that game, and unfortunately surrounded by a bunch of Bronco fans. And I was just nauseous because that was their team. They were the best team in the NFC that year.
Yeah.
And you had the Atlanta Falcons waiting for you in the Super Bowl, and it was going to happen.
Right.
And then, like you said, the next year, I can remember driving to the Meadowlands for the opening game of the year and listening to the pregame show and Francesa touting and just getting because his relationship with Bill Parcells was well known, and basically saying, this is the year. It's going to happen. You look at the AFC, and they are the best team. It's going to happen. And then, 12 minutes into the season, it's over.
Right.
And I'll say this: the way that team played I mean, and you remember Keyshawn being out and just completely devastated after that.
I remember
the emotion that he showed about
at press conference crying.
Injury, and the way the team played and came back. I mean, they could have tanked it after that. Having their leader hurt and just the guts ripped out from them, knowing that the goal to win the Super Bowl was going to be unattainable. The fact that they bounced back and finished 8-8 was pretty incredible and a big testament to how the team felt about Parcells, I think.